Hi, I'm Rocky Johnson, WWE Hall of Famer, father of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, getting ready to do an interview with the Hannibal TV. I just want to thank everybody for all the successful years I've had. Without you fans, I believe there would be no Rocky Johnson. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you that believed in me. And I did my best over the years to give you the best entertainment I could. And again, I want to say thank you, and I want to say watch the Hannibal TV show. Thank you very much.
So to get it started, could you just tell us about your childhood and where you grew up?
Okay, I grew up in a small town in Amherst, Nova Scotia, Canada. I stayed there, and my dad died when I was 12. At 14, I left, and I went to Toronto. So in Toronto, I got a job at a car wash for 90 cents an hour, which was big money in them days. It was in the 60s.
Yeah.
And 1964, I went to Jack Wentworth's gym, and I started training. I started boxing before that, and I boxed in Nova Scotia, and I couldn't make any money. And for some reason, I don't know why, but I had in my mind that I wanted to be a wrestler. So we went back and traced it. My brother's boy does all that. What do you call that? Genealogy?
Genealogy?
Yeah. And found out that my great-great-uncle used to travel with the carnivals and challenge anybody in the crowd to wrestle match. And if you beat him, you would get $10 and a bottle of whiskey. But I never got beat, but because he knew a couple of shooting moves.
Right.
He'd give you the leg, and then he'd front face lock you and drop you down. And so I guess maybe that's where wrestling came from, because I always tried to figure out, of all my families and that, why was I picked to be a wrestler? But I'm glad I did. I had 30-some years. I had a great career. It took me all over the world. I've been to Africa, been to Japan many times. I've been to Arabia. I've been to Egypt. I've been to New Zealand. I've been all through the United States, all through Canada. So I had a great career. If I had to do it over again, I'd do it a little different, but I would do it. I have no regrets.
For your boxing, is it true you actually sparred with Muhammad Ali and George Foreman?
Oh, yeah. Dwayne was born in Hayward, California, and George Foreman lived 6 miles from us in Oakland. So I got to know him at the Recreation Center, and he was getting ready to fight Joe Frazier for the heavyweight championship of the world. So we got talking. I had pictures with him and everything. We started sparring a lot. Believe it or not, at that time he was Cassius Clay. I met him in Toronto. He was getting ready to fight George Chavel.
Okay, I remember that.
Yeah. I started sparring. I'm going to tell you another true story, that we started sparring together, and I got to know him real good, and I probably sparred 300-400 rounds with him over the years. We put a piece of plywood on the floor, and we played the music, James Brown, Night Train, dun, 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 and we started doing the shuffle, and that's where he picked the Ollie Shuffle up.
Right.
So when I started wrestling, I called it the Rocky Shuffle. And on that Saturday enough, 3 months ago, I went to his funeral in Kentucky, which was great because after the funeral went by where he grew up in his house. His brother lived there. So I took him home, and then they took him and buried him. And I sparred a lot of rounds with him.
What was he like? Because a lot of us only know the camera side of him.
And the other side, playboy, love women, and be truthful. We all did in them days, And that's before he turned Muslim and all that. And drank a little bit, but we did too. But we never ever drank to get drunk or anything. We'd have parties, and there'd be women there and stuff like that. He was no different than anybody. But then he had that side. What it was, and a lot of people don't know this, he had a brother, Ray Clay, was actually a better fighter than Muhammad.
Really?
Yeah, but he couldn't talk. Now, to be straight across the board, the way it sounds, he got all of his from Gorgeous George, Ain't I Pretty, and every day. He, in the 60s and the 70s, he was, the whites loved to see him get beat, but he never got beat, Yeah. And he would rub it back into their face. They would say, oh, he looks great dressed up, but his shoes doesn't match his coat, or his shirt doesn't match. They always found that little something so he could rub it back. And he really went overboard. He rubbed it in it. And he'd tell him, I'm pretty. And that was all his lines. But believe it or not, and my wife can tell you, he got all these lines from his fifth wife that we know lives up by us in Florida. And we talk to her. We talk to her all the time, you know. And she used to write little poems for him. Okay, yes, it was his second wife. I'm sorry, but he just had that. If you were talking to him, he didn't have to stop and think. He could do an interview and just boom, 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 wrap it right up.
And you mentioned that fight he had with George Chuvalo. Since you lived in Toronto, did you ever spar with Chuvalo?
I did at Lansdowne AC Club. And he was he was a great guy. I just seen him a couple years ago. He was a great guy. He could hit hard, but he was a catcher. He took so many punches, you know, and I think that eventually, like in the wrestling, eventually it's going to get to you where you end up with concussions to that. I mean, he won 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali, but if you ever watch that tape, he probably took 700 punches. I'm not saying they're all power punches, but they'll get to you over the years. I just seen him a couple years ago in Hamilton at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and I was talking with him. He knew me, then he didn't know me, then he knew me, then he didn't, you know. And he had a bad life with his wife and kids all passed him. He was a great guy. I said, George, you remember me? I mean, I got old and fat, and he probably didn't remember me, you know.
And you changed your name, of course, to Rocky Johnson when you became a pro wrestler. Where did you come up with that name? Came up with that name because in boxing, I wanted to be a boxer, and Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion of the world. So I came up with the Johnson. My idol, I used to pay 50 cents to get the Ring magazine every month, and my idol was Rocky Marciano. Okay. So I clicked them together, Rocky Johnson, and that's how I came up with the name. And when you first started in the wrestling business, was there a lot of racism still in those years? Oh, it was then and it is now. I think now it's more covered up, but there was a lot. But I had the opportunity, if you could work, and you know what I mean by working, that they couldn't be denied. You know, I'm not going back bragging, but I was the first black champion in Florida. I was the first black champion in Texas. I was the first black champion in Georgia. You know, I broke the South wide open, so I couldn't be denied because I was headstrong. Yeah. You know, I kept myself in shape, and the stuff they were doing in the South, I wouldn't go for. They wanted to whip me on TV, like you know they used to do with the slaves and all that. I said no. I came in as an athlete, and I'll leave it as an athlete, and they respected me for that. We had a boxer versus wrestler with Jerry Lawler, and I was the boxer, and I was working in Texas at the time. We went in, and my wife can tell you because her dad was one of the small town promoters. We turned like 5,000 people away. They believed in us, but they had other blacks there that they were out there eating watermelon, eating fried chicken. That's scenario type. Yeah. And I wasn't going for that. I said, no, I came as an athlete. But them days, as you know, there was territories. WWE didn't own everything. So if you didn't like Texas, you could go to Tennessee. If you didn't like Tennessee, you could go to Toronto. So some territories were worse than others. Oh, yeah. You know, the South, I never had a problem. But as far as racial, it's always going to be there. Yeah. Whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Puerto Rican, no matter what you are. But you can't let that interfere with your performance. People are going to remember you. You know, when they go home, they're going to say, hey, did you see him? What a match he had. What a great, they didn't know what work was, so what a great wrestler he was. You know, but you also had to have somebody to work with. Right. You know, I controlled 20 drop kicks. I was the king of the drop kick. But the guy's not standing there, who am I going to drop kick? Yeah. You know. Yeah, your drop kick is possibly the best of all time. Is there any secret you had to developing that drop kick? Yeah, I used to use leg weights, 5-pound leg weights. And I was to go to the gym and I would drop kick a punching bag. And I'd put a mark and I'd go higher. And then I'd put a mark and I'd go higher. So you wanted to talk about prejudice. I don't get into a lot of the prejudice, but what I'll say, I work with a guy in Canada. You know him well. After the tape, I'll tell you who it was. Finish was our street drop kicks, sunset flip. So
I drop kicked him. I could have counted 20 before he got up. And I know I still got 2 more drop kicks or so. So I started shuffling my feet. When I started shuffling my feet, the crowd went nuts. I said, oh, okay. So it's just drop kick, here I am. I'm doing all this, shuffle my feet. So you can lay there as long as you want. You know, you'll get guys who will make you look good, you know, business. And you'll get guys who'll try to, especially if you had to do a job. And you know what I mean by doing a job. So
now, you also wrestled for Stampede Wrestling. What were your memories of that territory?
memories is there. My first match, they're going to tell you the story. Whipper Billy Watson brought me in. He called Jack Wentworth. He was running for Senate up in Canada, or a county, whatever they call it. So he called Jack Wentworth in Hamilton. I used to take the bus twice a week to go over to the wrestling school. And he said, do you have any black wrestlers? He said, well, I got a kid here. He's young. He's 18 years old. He's cocky, sassy, but he looks like he's a decent athlete. So they brought me up. And he put me on TV, and he had me go like a minute and a half. And I'm going, what can I show the people in a minute and a half? But not realizing, years later, I realized when you're green, the longer you go, the more mistakes you're going to make. So I wrestled Purple Savisco. He backdropped me. I landed on my feet. I hit him 3 drop kicks, sunset flip, 1, 2, 3. Watson comes out and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, you don't know this, but I've been training him for 2 years. And he's going to be my next world champion and all. He went on and on and on. And I'm just standing there, you know. So I go home. My mother said, he just missed you 2 weeks ago. He's on TV because, you know, there was no, everything was kayfabe in them days.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I knew him from before. I let it go, you know. So anyway, as it went on, he lost the election. For losing the election, he sent me to Calgary. I went in there. I was like 6 foot. When I left, I was like 6'2". Because he stressed me. He broke a blood vessel in my eye.
Stu Hart?
Yeah. Stu, I had nothing but respect for him. He told me, he said, kid, someday you'll be a world champion. But Stu would get you on your hands and knees. Then he'd hook the hold on you. Then he'd say, fight. And everybody said he was a great shooter. But don't forget, he won a silver medal for Canada in the 40s and the Olympics. But a good shooter is take my arm when I don't want to give it to you. Because he used to take those ex-football players, have them screaming, and they'd pass out, they'd pee themselves and everything else. He loved that. And then I ended up working with him around the loop for opening match, 20 minutes every night for about 6 months. And he respected me. After he broke the blood vessel in my eye, I didn't go back for a couple of days. He wanted to see if he was coming back. And I said to myself, well, I'm not going to drive a truck the rest of my life or work in a car wash. So I went back. And I did learn a lot from him.
Was there decent money in that territory?
And that territory, more than my days, I had a guarantee of $250 a week. You worked every night. Sometimes you get a Sunday off. But you got to remember, in them days, the average person was making $80 a week. So here I am, I'm making $250, you know. Yeah. So it was decent money, not compared to today. But yeah, you had guarantees. And you had guys that were making $100 a week. You had guys that were making, like Sweet Daddy Seek. He came in, he was on a guarantee for $500 a week. And I'm going, wow, boy, if I ever make $500 a week, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Eventually I did.
Other than Stu, who was the main person you wrestled in that territory?
Sweet Daddy.
Sweet Daddy.
Yeah, and he would say, listen to me, Rock, listen. And I had a tendency, I guess from the boxing that of going 100 miles an hour. You know, boom, boom, and then boom. Says, calm down, slow down, sell this, make a little comeback. I'm going to cut you off, get some more heat, make another comeback. Okay, now we're going home for the finish. Boom, boom, boom. I'd throw the drop kicks, and then I would miss the last one. And boy, and I'd sell it, and he'd pick me up, boom, boom. Then he would beat me. 1, 2, 3. I had no problem doing the job, and I had no problem going over. And Stu liked my attitude, and I talked to Brent all the time, and Brent was the one that was playing phone tag with Dwayne. And he told me, I'm going to take your boy under my wing, him and Stone Ghost. I said, great. And look how he turned out.
Now, you were talking to me off camera a bit about the Toronto territory. Could you just tell us a bit about your success?
Yeah, Toronto territory, I was making $175 to $200 a week. But I wasn't in Calgary. You know, in Calgary, you had to pay for your hotel every night. You had to pay for your own food, man. Yeah. So I was working Hamilton, Oshawa, small towns, And then on Sunday, I was getting $25 a match. And then on Sunday was Maple Leaf Gardens. And that's how I was always on the opener, which I didn't care because I was like a mark. I went out to watch the other wrestlers. And I get $50 for that. So I was still making 150, 175 a week when the average person was making $2 an hour, bringing home $80. You know, my first car I paid $225 for. So, but I was the happiest guy in the world.
Was it in Toronto where you had the NWA World Title shots?
No, I had the NWA World Title shot in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And I beat Terry Funk. And that after the count of three, because the referee's down, that's the way we planned it. The referee's heads down, 1, 2, 3. And at three, after three, he put his foot on the rope. So the referee, I get up and I'm jumping around. The referee looks and sees his foot on the rope. And he goes, no, 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 no. Yeah, and we almost had it right. But that was a good finish because I did beat him, but then he was smart enough to put his foot on the rope.
Right. What was he like outside the ring?
Terry was a great guy. We all called him Wild Man because he would take the goofiest bumps. He done to do a blade job like Abdullah. I started with him, but they got blood crazy. Every night they wanted to do blade jobs and stuff and all that. But Terry was a great guy, better guy to work with than Dory. I worked with Dory a lot of times. I went to St. Louis with a 90-minute draw with him. But Dory was the wrestler where he was a mat man.
Yeah.
I wasn't a mat man. I was, a high spot man. And Terry was just the opposite than Dory. Terry got over because Terry was a goofy bump taker. You hit him with the right hand, he'd go over the ropes backwards, he's hitting the back of his head and he's running. I can tell you a great story if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Him and Dusty Rhodes were in Florida here. And it was the first time that superstar Billy Graham was a WWE champion. And he wrestled Harley Race. Terry Funk wrestled Dusty Rhodes for the NWA World Title. So they had to come back when both were bleeding. So they throw Terry out, runs his head into the post. So Terry, he wouldn't stop. He would shoot with it. Boom. So he falls backwards. Dusty rolls him in the ring, covers him. Referee goes, 1, 2. Then he goes, and he fainted because that wasn't the finish. But Terry was actually knocked out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he's run his head into the post and Dusty picked him up and rest him in it. The referee knew that wasn't the finish and he couldn't switch the world title. So, but that killed it. That killed Florida for about 6 months.
Did you ever wrestle Billy Graham?
I started with Billy. I wrestled him 1,000 times. I wrestled him and I lived with him when I went to Los Angeles and we used to work out at Gold's Gym every morning. He was the biggest teenage Mr. World ever was. He was 19 years old, but actually he was 20. But they made a rig where he was 19 and he won Teenage Mr. World. And I worked with him, and when he first started out, he was very green. He was stiff. He didn't mean to be. He was always wanted to apologize. I'm sorry. I said, hey, man, loosen up. So they sent him to San Francisco. Nobody had a body like him in them days. I mean, he was steroid up, boom. So when you get that steroid rage, and what he done, World Shires took a liking to him and took a liking to me. And what it was, Earl Maynard was there in San Francisco. I was in LA. We were supposed to switch every 6 months.
Right.
But Roy Shires fell in love with me. I stayed there 9 years.
Wow.
And that's when my boy was born. And Roy Shires, I remember giving $100 extra. He wrestled the beer. And they're wrestling. Somehow the muzzle came off. And the beer had Billy's arm and it's actually in his mouth. But I guess the beer was a worker too, because he didn't bite down on it. Billy pulled his arm out and I just broke the skin. He was bleeding and he sewed that arm and he went back to the dressing room. He just left the ring and people went nuts. So, oh, Billy's got the rabies. The beer bit Billy. They talked about that for 3 months.
Wow.
So then they wrapped his arm. Every time he'd go on TV, do an interview, He said, I want a second chance at that beer. Because, you know, the guy that owned the beer would only be in the territory for a week, and then he'd be in the territory for another week and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned your son being born in San Francisco. I guess you were married to Peter Maivia.
Yeah, I was born, yeah. That's how I became, Peter was a high chief, and I ended up becoming a chief because she was a princess and his mother was a queen, but they don't recognize her. The queen, they recognize the men. You know, like my boy has a title. Now he has 2 daughters. So when he dies, neither one of them can get the title. The title will go in escrow until a male is born.
Okay.
It goes through the male. That's what his tattoo is. And I wouldn't get the tattoo because I knew it would hurt too bad.
Yeah.
Because they do it with, Dwayne's only got it from here to here, and it took 19 hours.
Right.
And I think that's what killed Peter. He had to, from here all the way up tattooed. They did it in 3 days with a shark's tooth and the bone. They take him down to the ocean, put him in the salt water, bring him back, work on him again. Took 3 days to do it.
Now, did he have any problem with his daughter dating a wrestler when she started dating you?
Peter didn't. She did.
Okay.
Because she knew, she wasn't pregnant or anything like that, but she knew wrestlers had women in every town. You know, it's like football players are all waiting, basketball players, and we used to call them arena rats. They were always at the door. And we used to make a big joke about it. You know, a 6-pack arena rat, $100 payoff, and the wrestler never opened his mouth. So she knew, you know, because she caught Peter 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And he ended up, you know, and I'm not saying anything bad because I loved him to death. But he ended up leaving her and living with this girl that he had 2 kids with. And then eventually he went back to his wife. But in the meantime, she came and lived with us. That was the worst 6 months of my life. You know, she was a pain in the, but what I didn't understand till later, I took the only thing she ever had left. Because Peter had left and went with this woman.
Yeah.
And all she had was the daughter. And I took that from her. And at the end, where we have a couple condos in Florida, and she had one there. It was 2,000 condos where we lived there. And I used to bring her chickens, and I'd go pick up her medicine for her. We became real good friends. But when you're young and you're loved, you don't realize that you're taking somebody. Like when Dwayne went away to go to college here, I mean, you thought it was the end of the world for his mother. That's why we moved from Tampa up to Miami, because she couldn't cut the apron strings.
Okay.
I said, you got to let him go. He's 20 years old. He's in college, you know. And so we're all very close, you know, with my wife and her, and we all get together. We're all together last Christmas. Dwayne's ex-wife works for him, you know, and he has a daughter, and now he has another little daughter. So there was no lawyers or nothing involved, you know.
Was Dwayne always a wrestling fan?
Always, yeah. You know where he learned to talk? When the VCRs first came out, we bought him one, and we bought him a camera like you had. He set up on the tripod, and he'd do interviews. Hulk Hogan, Jimmy Snuka, Rocky Johnson. And he would entertain himself for hours. And he was Roddy Piper. How, you know, and he just loved it. So then he goes and plays football. Then he plays college ball. Then he goes and plays for the Calgary Stampeders. And he come back and he says, Dad, I want to talk to you. So I go, uh-oh, he got somebody pregnant. And he said, I played college ball, I played high school ball, I played pro. It's not in my blood. I don't want to play no more. I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I want to wrestle. I said, okay. I said, your grandfather's a wrestler, I'm a wrestler. So if I'm going to train you, I'm going to train you 150%. And I was hard on him, but he never gave up. Then one day he was clowning around, and I said, look, if you want sympathy, go home to your mother and get it. He said, that's where I'm going. He walked all the way home, 2 miles. And when I got home, his mother didn't want to speak to me. What are you doing to our son? You're making him walk in the rain. I said, because he's clowning around. If you're going to be this, you got to take it serious. I took it serious. It's my life and my career.
You're very well known for your tag team with Tony Atlas.
Yes, we became.
How long were you guys together? And
well, I met Tony when he first started, and I tried to help him. But he had the best body in the business. And I can sum it up like Vince McMahon told him, you got $1 million body, but you have a 5-cent brain. we'd have still been champions. But once we got champions, he wouldn't make the small towns. He was hard to do business with. And Vince came and said, so when I go into Washington, D.C., matter of fact, Sugar Ray Leonard was there. He was in the back waiting to see me because he knew I sparred with Ollie and Foreman. And then I became friends with him, and I still am. And I seen Bobo Brazil sitting there. Then I knew something was going on. And they fired him right on the spot right there.
Wow.
Yeah, and they took the belts from us. And we still going to be champions because we broke it. We were the first Black World Tag Team champion. And they were going with it. And we were selling out. And they were buying it. We were doing 22,000 people at the Gardens, 20,000 in Baltimore, you know. And Tony was the Bronx. You know, he was picking guys up 300 pounds over his head, but he couldn't work. And he'd do the strong south, and then he'd sell and he'd tag me. And I was the guy that was the workhorse. I had to come in with the drop kicks, the shuffle, that. But what he didn't understand, that I was a Samoan chief, and I still am. And we work with the Wild Samoans because we beat them. So, and I'm as it has it, I'm the chief of their village in Apia, Samoa. So who are they going to take care of?
Right.
So the minute Tony come in, they let him do a couple of things. They stomp him. They beat on, they tag me, and over the ropes I'd come, and boy, they'd be right there with me. Drop kick, punches, jabs, a big right, and they go to the ring, and then I'd hit them, they go backwards, and the crowd was going nuts. I never ever told them, hey, I'm a chief of their village, but their family. So, you know, so they really took care of me. We got over real good. But then with Tony, if he made one mistake, he was so roided up that he'd go off just like that. He would forget about the match. And I said, Tony, calm down, relax. But Vince put up with him. Finally, he called me and said, Rock, I can't take it no more. I'm trying to figure out, what did I do? Then he told me, he said, you know, but they had fired him before. And when they fired him before, they brought me in. I was in Portland, Oregon. So I knew I could make big money in New York. So I said, Roar, coming in. So I went in. Then they get the idea, we never had a black tag team. Then they get the idea, we never had Black World Tag Team champions, which was good in those days, in the 80s. So that's how, they called him and said, we're going to give you a second chance. You're going to work with, Rocky's going to be your partner. He didn't have a problem with none of that. But when you outshine somebody, there's always that with the jealousy there, you know. And he couldn't figure out, Rocky, every time I come in, they stop me. Every time you come in, they give you this big comeback and make you look like $1 million. I couldn't say, hey, they're family. You know?
Is everything okay with you guys now, or do you not talk?
I was to tell you the truth. I talk to him now and then. He signed for that lawsuit against New York. I didn't, because I wasn't going to get involved in it. And how can you prove, yeah, you got 10 concussions, but how can you prove you got them all in New York? When you work Texas, you work Virginia, you work Canada, you know. So I stayed out of that. So he run into some financial difficulty, 3 or 4 months ago? Longer than that, probably a year ago. So he called us, we helped him out. We did 2 shows, we did the night, 2 big shows. And he took, instead of saying, can I give you a couple hundred now, and I'll send you a couple hundred a month, he took off on me both times. And that, it wasn't the money part, it's the way he treated me that I lost a lot of respect for him. Because if I owed you money, and I said, look, I don't have it now, but can I at least give you 50? But he went out the back door both times. So I just stay away from him. He's called a couple times, I never answered the phone, you know. And he means well, and I wish him nothing but the best. You know, we're contemplating on doing the movie, The Ring King, you know, the Rocky Johnson story. And we're going to do the thing where we won the belts, and he'd have been perfect because it would have been a real shoot, you know. But Dwayne said we're going to end up probably using Ron Simmons. It's to him. We can't use his name, we know that. So we'll call it Soul Patrol, we'll call it something.
Now, you had a world title match against Harley Race at one point.
I had 4 or 5 of them.
Okay. What territories were that?
I had 1 here in Florida. I had 2 here in Florida. Then I had 90-minute. I had 60-minute with him in St. Louis. Then a 90-minute with him. And he took bumps you wouldn't believe, but look at him today. He's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
He's a great guy, great worker. He could take care of himself. So you let somebody like that, and he was the champion, you let them call the match. You know what I'm saying? You don't say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You let them tell you, hey, one tackle, drop down, jump over, 2 drop kicks, get the headlock again. I said, okay. You know, and I start selling. And he let me know when we come back, then we're going to stop you. But 90 minutes is a long time to go. And I worked with him twice. And I'll never forget, Sam Mushnick was probably the best payoff man in the business. So I was in Florida. Actually, me and Jerry Briscoe used to go up. Then I went up with Ric Flair when I was in Carolina. And he would pay you. That was the biggest payoff I ever got in my life. Up to that point, he'd give me $3,566.27. He would he right to the penny. He was known to be the best payoff man in the business.
Now, one place that wasn't known for great payoffs was Memphis. And
I was the first and only ever to have a guarantee.
Okay.
I went in when I did the boxing thing I told you about.
Yeah.
I was in Texas, and they would say, "Come in, we're going to make you champion. We're going to do this because you got over great." What he did when I started the match, he got the arm bar, and I did the flip, and I kicked him off. I did the back roll, and I started jabbing him. I hit him with the right hand. He went over the roof backwards. Then people sound like cannon going off. And then I started to get cotton mouth, started to hyperventilate because I never heard that before. And so I said, okay, I'll come in. And I said, you know, I've got to have at least $1,000 a week. And he goes, we don't give guarantees. And I said, well, I'm not coming in because I was doing good in Texas.
Yeah.
Texas got mad when I left, you know, and I was a Texas champion at the time.
Yeah.
And I was making $700, $800, $900 a week, but I knew there was long trips there, so I stayed. I'll stay here in Texas.
Yeah.
And they called me on the phone. Jerry Lawler called me. And that time it was Lawler, Jarrett, and Nick Goulas were all together. And then they ended up split.
Right.
And when they split, I had to make the choice. Whether I'm going with Goulas, he took one half tier, or whether I'm going with Jarrett. But see, Jarrett was the payoff man. He had given me my guarantee. And I ended up having $1,500, $1,800 weeks there.
Did you think Jarrett was a good booker?
No. I thought Lawler was a good booker, but I thought he was 20 years ahead of his time.
Right.
They're doing stuff now, you know, that Lawler was doing 25 years ago, and they're saying there's no other territory you could do that in, only Memphis.
Right.
He had a guy, I never forget, standing in a coffin, actually one of the boys with a mask on, Lawler doing the interview, you open the coffin, and you go, you okay? And you go, okay. And they close the coffin. So somebody called in the bomb scare. We all left. They forgot he was in there in the coffin. So he stayed in that coffin for like an hour and 45 minutes. When they took that mask off him, and the water he went up, took his coffin, went to the car, got in his car, and nobody knows to this day where he ever went.
Wow.
Can you imagine being in that coffin, standing there for an hour and a half?
Yeah.
I wouldn't get in the coffin to start with.
No.
But that was his gimmick.
Did you ever wrestle for the Sheik's territory?
I left Toronto.
Okay.
And I went to Nova Scotia. Then I went to Toronto. Then I went to the Sheik. And I became United States champion there with Ben Justice.
Okay.
And I stayed there for like a year. And this is so funny how I got to LA. Bobo Zill was a big star in Detroit. And then you go every Friday to Los Angeles for the Los Angeles Sportathon. So Bobo hurt his knee, he hurt his hip, so they set me down. And I went down. I was just a young kid in the 20s. And at that time, Bobo, I would say, was probably in the 40s. So, you know, he could make a comeback with hip bumps, but then I come in with the jabs, the drop kicks. And she came and said, they want you in LA. I said, well, what do you think? He said, I can always bring you back here. He said, give it a shot. I was going down there, and then I went to LA, and then Earl Maynard was there. He had won Mr. America, and he had a great body on, but he didn't get over it because the blacks didn't understand his accent because he was from the Bahamas.
Okay.
Hung on, and they just didn't dig it. So they were going to do the switch every 6 months. I was going to be in LA for 6 months and in San Francisco. So Roy Shires overridden, so stay with me, kid, I'll make you money. I stayed there 9 years. That's a long time to be in one territory.
And they were drawing huge crowds.
They were drawing huge. I was making 2,000, 2,500. I'm talking about in 70s, early 80s. He was making that kind of money. He was driving his and her Cadillacs, you know, and the longest trip was Las Vegas once a month, but they flew us. We fly there, we get to see all the shows free. It was like paradise.
Who would you say is better between the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher? Who would you say is the better wrestler between those two?
Well, there's no question about the Sheik. Because the minute you touch the Abbey, he wanted to cut himself.
Yeah.
And I tell him, man, you're bleeding all over me.
Yeah.
I don't want you bleeding all over me. But the Sheik would actually take a couple bumps. And Sheik wasn't a great worker, but he had great psychology. He knew when to run. He knew when to look back and, With the Abbey, he just wanted to keep coming. And the more you hit him, and, you know, he had blades on every finger.
Yeah.
And the minute you hit him, he's bleeding all over you. I wore white boots and white drum. I used to tell him, I said, man, why are you bleeding so much? I said, if I get a cut or something on me. But, okay, now his head looks like a canoe.
Yeah.
You know, I just seen him. We seen him last year at WrestleMania, but we seen him at, what do you call it? Yeah, the WrestleCon. And he was in a wheelchair, can't walk. But I didn't feel sorry for him because, you know, me and him, we actually started together. We went in Vancouver together. And then when he got the big push, he kind of forgot about me, like, I'm a little bit better than you. And he was making more money. But I always believe what goes around comes around. And it came back. You know, he was the first millionaire in Japan. They never seen a guy like this. The minute you touch him, he's got all the... And people were actually running from him, walking down the street, they would see him, and they would run across the road.
And you wrestled Jimmy Snuka a bunch of times.
100 times, yeah. Jimmy was a good worker.
Yeah.
He could work baby face and heel. I thought he was a better heel than a baby face. But the reason they kept him baby face because who's going up on a 15-foot cage doing that dive? I hate to say it, but I had just left him when we were on our way back home, where we live in Florida, and he passed away. But I went to see him every day. He didn't know anybody, but he knew us. It was Brother Rob. And when I leave, I'd have to go into the bathroom. He'd open the bathroom, the garage door. I'd go that way. And he'd get up and he'd look all through the closets looking for me. And then he was looking for his wrestling bag because he had cancer all through him. Then it went to the brain. But what amazed me, he called the kids in, hugged them, kissed them. His daughter was there, Serona. He took her hand and said, I have to go now. And closed his eyes and died. So do they know it? Do they sense it? Or what?
All that, the controversial stuff that happened with him and that
I think he would have got over it. See, the case has never been solved because he's never been, they ruled him he couldn't.
Yeah, he couldn't testify.
Yeah, so what the problem was, it was taken care of through New York. I was there when it happened because I woke up that morning. We all used to go up and have breakfast, and I seen the ambulance there. I said, one of the boys got in trouble. So I had breakfast. I went to TV, and that's when they came and told him that the girl died. What had happened was, what killed him was that book he wrote, because he said she fell and hit her head down the bathroom sink, which she did. Whether he hit her or not, that'll never be proven now. But then his book he wrote that they pulled over on the side of the road, and she had to go to the bathroom, and she fell and rolled down the embankment and hit her head, and he brought her and put her in the car, took her to the hotel, and put her in bed, which didn't really make sense. So why did he do that in the book? Because at that time, I think he was starting to get cancer. His mind was going. And then that's when they brought it all back up again. 30 years later, they're bringing up these charges,
So
But as far as working and drawing, I was there and I seen it. When they were pushing Hulk Hogan, he was blonde hair, blue eye, All-American. He'd be in the gardens Saturday night, and we'd be in Baltimore because we were running 2 or 3 towns a night, and there'd be 15 to 18,000 people. The next show, you brought Jimmy in, you turned people away. But Vince Sr., Vince Jr. had the All-American, but then look at Hogan now. They took him out of the Hall of Fame, took his ring back, everything. Well, he didn't get the ring back, but
How did Hogan treat you over the years?
He actually treated me good because I helped him get started. He was Terry Below, and we worked out in Tampa at the Sportatorium where we did TV. And he'd tell the guy, and he would drive on these long trips and we'd pay trans. I would never charge him trans because it was only making $35-40 a match. And I only used him 2-3 times a week. And he'd stay in the dressing room in New York and he'd say, nobody will ever say anything bad about Rocky to me. He took care of me when I first started. But then at the end, I probably would have been the same if they had to give me that push and he got the big head. And then that sex thing, that just killed his whole reputation. And that was all set up by his best friend. I don't know if you know the story, but it was a love spring. And they had the boot camp for TNA. So he wanted to get divorced. But he didn't want to give his wife anything. So he said to Hogan, I'll pay you, I don't know how much he paid him, maybe $20,000, $50,000, I don't know. He said, you go to be with my wife. He was in the closet. He was in the closet taping it. And then what he did after he taped it, he did the double cross on Hogan and sold it to Gorwick. Then they put it on TV and that killed him.
What do you think of all this sex stuff with wrestlers these days? Because your son keeps himself very clean. You never hear anything bad about it. Yeah. A lot of these guys, there's sex tapes, pictures.
Yeah, they get in a position that they've never been in. You know, all of a sudden you're going from, just to give you a round figure, you're going from 500 a week to 5,000 a week. So now everything's there. You're a star. And you start, and then here comes, you hurt your knee. They give you a painkiller. And then the next day it's 2. Then the next week it's 5. And then they get hooked. I have the thing at home in the wrestling business. Within the last 10 years, we've lost 78 wrestlers. That's pretty hard to believe.
Yeah.
But we have the document at home. Wow. Yeah, because it's so easy to get. When you're walking around like with Atlas, we got paid one time on a Tuesday, and then we had like $11,000 a week. Friday, I had to lend $500 because they go set the whole bar up. Then when they started with the cocaine, gives to all their friends. And first thing they spent $5,000. Look at Ric Flair when he went to England. He set the bar up. The bill came back $37,000. They had to call New York. New York had to give him the credit card number to bail him out.
Did you ever wrestle Ric Flair?
Oh, 100 times. I was his partner, Sweet Ebony Diamond, and then I worked with him 100 times. He was over great in Charlotte, and he made big, big money, but he lived it. We would go to St. Louis. I could take the shuttle to the hotel for $3. So you give the guy $4, you tip him $1. He would have a limo waiting for him for $350, going the same place I'm going.
Right.
No. And he wore the $800 alligator shoes, $1,000 suits. He had a beautiful home. I was at his home. It was 2 stories. And he had a glass elevator. So you're only going up one step. Yeah, it's just you're going up. But when you got $20,000 a week coming in. Now, what was so funny, when I got inducted into a Hall of Fame in 2008, he got inducted with me. He had his 4 ex-wives at ringside. And he introduced every one of them to the crowd. And they're all sitting there. Well, look at him today. I mean, I truly believe what goes around comes around. You do evil, evil's going to come back to you, whether it's 5 years or whether it's 20 years. I hate to see the position he's in now. But look at him now.
Do you think he's going to be able to stop drinking?
No, it's in his system. It's like if they took the blood from us, we would die. So if you take the alcohol from him, he's going to die.
Another wrestler that had his fair share of, substance problems was Piper over the years. Did you ever work with him in Mid-Atlantic or anywhere? Oh,
I worked with him in New York when he had Piper's Pit. We worked at Angle. We finished it up in Hamilton, Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. But he had a lot of problems too. You know, he had that monkey. Once you get that monkey on your back, I can truthfully sit here and say on this TV, or I can say to the world, I never got hooked on none of that stuff. Painkillers, yeah, I took them, but I was scared because I knew I watched the other guys, and I seen, and I ended up with probably throwing 30,000 drop kicks in 35 years. I ended up with both knees done, but I never got hooked on drugs. And I've had them put it under my nose, and I would tell them, I can't do it because I have a blood disease. Because once you get hooked, you were hooked. And that's what happened to Jimmy. I watched Jimmy when he came in, and all of a sudden, a month later, he was a different guy. Because now it's $500, $1,000, $1,500 for cocaine. And
You had quite a few matches with Greg Valentine.
yeah, stiffest guy in the business. Horrible to work with. I say, but he said he liked to come down with that elbow across your chest, like to lay it in.
Yeah.
So I turned around, and boy, I laid one on him. And he said the hardest I've ever been hit in the chest was by Rocky Johnson.
Wow.
Give it right back to him. But he was so stiff. He just couldn't get the idea. He took your arm, you had to fight because he wasn't doing it on purpose. Now I work with his dad, Johnny Valentine,
Yeah.
and he was the same way. He was stiff when he grabbed the leg. He would say, hey, man, my knee only goes so far.
Now, I don't know if you've seen this video on the internet, and I don't really know where he's coming from because I've never noticed this from any matches I've seen of you, but there's a video of Don Morocco on the internet saying that he found you to be lazy in the ring. Did you ever see that or hear him
No,
say
I know.
that?
Yeah, he said that because that's where the jealousy stepped in. I work with him in New York, and we sold out places, but they're always going to find something if it doesn't go their way. Jim Dillon put the same thing in his book, that I was lazy. I never worked with him, And I said to him, and I seen him today.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, well, it doesn't bother me what you put in the book. He said, hey, I'm nothing personal. He wished me all the best. I shook hands with him. He said, I'm just trying to sell my book. I said, if you think that statement makes you sell your book, then God bless you. I never held grudges. You're going to get people that like it. You're going to get people that don't. And you know yourself, you've been in the business. There's so much jealousy in this business. It's ridiculous.
And Kevin Sullivan was here today too. Did you ever work with him in Florida or anywhere?
I never worked with. I worked with him twice in Honolulu.
Okay.
And that's the only time I ever worked with him. And he was a good guy. He had good psychology.
Unfortunately, it seems like the Hawaii territory is dead now. But what was it like at its peak?
When we were there, my father-in-law had bought it from Ed Francis, and it was doing good. Where we were getting talent, we didn't have to pay their flight because we were catching them going to Japan. So we keep them for 2 weeks, and then we catch them on the way back. And we keep them 2 or 3 weeks. Like Flair and them came over, and they stayed a week, and they brought one of his wives, and they had a holiday, so we used him. He was world champion.
Right.
So you couldn't make big money there, but you could make a living. Plus, when I was there, I was going to Japan 3 times a year, so I was picking up money there. And I was living with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, so I had no rent, no nothing,
Did you ever work Bruiser Brody in Japan?
No, but I worked with his partner. Me and him were partners in Puerto Rico.
Stan Hansen?
Yeah. Actually, I give Brody the title in Florida here, the TV title. And I worked with him 4 or 5 times. I had a good match with him. He was just a wild guy, But he never hurt you or anything. He was scary looking. He wore them big fur boots and everything. But he got over it. And it's a shame what happened to him, but I was in the show before that. And then they sent my check, and I didn't like the payout. And I was with the Wild Samoans, so we didn't go back to that next show. And that's when he died.
Right, because that territory is known for their poor payoffs. Supposedly they owe you money too.
Yeah, they still do. But what's the sense of fighting them? You ain't going to get it.
And they got what's coming to them now because I guess their island's destroyed.
They're destroyed. Carlos Colon lost his health. He had a huge gambling problem. So instead of giving it to the boys, he was going to the casino.
Right.
You fly in there, give you a hotel ticket, send you a check for $200. I mean, come on,
Or it'll bounce like they did with me when I was there.
Yeah, well, then you were there, right? Yeah.
Now, when did you finally decide to retire and why?
My knees started bothering me. And I woke up one day and I said, I got to slow down. You got to remember now, it's different. They're working 3 or 4 times a week. I went 9 months without a day off. And it took its toll, And I started, my neck was starting to hurt, my back was hurting, and I was going to the doctor. And what had happened, I had a cage match with Sergeant Slaughter in Baltimore. It's the biggest house I ever drew. The reason why, because they put the tickets up $2 more, because it was a cage match.
Right.
And I got hurt in Puerto Rico, and I came back, my knee was like this. I said, I can't go out there tonight. He said, you have to. People are here to see it sold out. The doctor gave me a shot in both knees. And I went. Didn't go long, 8 or 9 minutes, but it took a toll. Then my knee started hurting. And then I started putting more pressure on this one. Then this one started hurting. And if I didn't throw drop kicks in that, Vince and them would get mad. So I said, I'm going to back off, slow down. And I weaned my way out. And I it's always in your blood. So I did a few outlaw shows and stuff like that. But I enjoy doing like I'm doing, just coming in, doing an autograph session, meet some of the guys. Like I went to Charlotte, and me and Johnny Walker, wrestling too, were the tag team champions in Georgia 30 years ago. And I hadn't seen him in 30 years.
Right.
All of a sudden, I see him up there. We hugged each other. We're talking. And one thing led to another. I go, how old are you now? He goes, oh, I'm 74. I go, okay. So that night, unfortunately, he had a heart attack. And I had to take him to the hospital. They look at his driver's license. He's 79. So wrestlers never grow old. They just lie about their age, But he was a great guy. And now he lives, his wife was from Hawaii. Their plan was make their living, go back and retire in Hawaii. And he made a lot of money. And unfortunately, his wife died of cancer. But he's still back in Honolulu.
Who was your favorite opponent in your career?
Where? In the business?
Yeah, in the whole business.
I had 2 or 3 of them. Like Jimmy was one that was there for you. They knew when you was getting ready to jab. They knew when you was getting ready to drop kick. I had a lot of good matches with Harley Race, but they were hard matches. But, you know what I mean? People enjoyed it, but I didn't.
Right.
That's the difference. Well, you go in and work, I can go in and work with you and have a great match, and all of a sudden you're slamming me. Harley wants you to slam him 15 times. He wanted to suplex you 10 times. And you're going in 60 minutes, 90 minutes, it takes a toll. But to name one guy, I couldn't, because I've had a lot of good matches with a lot of good workers. For example, with Piper, all the monkeys he had on his back, I had great matches with him in Charlotte. Then when he went to New York, I guess his personal business, but he did it on the flip side, And he walked out on Vince and everything. Then he got a break in the movies. So I have nothing bad to say about him, because I wrestled him in Toronto, I wrestled him in Hamilton, I watched him in Oshawa, all those places.
What was your favorite town to work in?
Never had a favorite town, but when I started, everything all went back to Maple Leaf Gardens.
Right.
Because then I was a big time. But the biggest thing is when you make Madison Square Gardens.
Yeah.
Then that's the ultimate. You're there. And I can remember the first night I walked in Madison Square Gardens. I said, this is it. You can't go no higher. And you can't when you're in Madison Square Gardens.
Now, you started to talk about the training of your son. Was it just you training him pretty much one-on-one?
Yeah, just me. I took him down. I had a friend of mine who had a karate school and a boxing school, Cisco. And he had a ring in there. It was an old ring, all banged up, beat up. But I took him down. Ron Slinkert, which I broke into business, was passed away the same day I got inducted in the Hall of Fame. He would come down and help me. And then all of a sudden, I'm reading where Pat Patterson trained him, this one trained him. I've never been in the ring with him. And when he was ready, because I was with Pat for 9 years in San Francisco, I said, you want to take a look at him? So I went down and I worked with him, and Pat watched, and actually I made him look good. He went back to Vince and said, you got to bring Rocky's son in. And Vince said, when? Pat said, yesterday. And they brought him in. They took him, when his first match was in Corpus Christi, Texas. And when he came back, I can't think of his name now, I'll think of it in a minute, said to him, Vader. Vader said to him, where you been working before? He said, no, this is my first match. And they couldn't believe it, because 3 months he's telling me he was ready. And he knew all the holes. But I can take a 6-year-old kid, teach him my arm bar, and that. I had to teach him psychology. And I put psychology. And what he did, when Pat Patterson said, what's wrong with you? You're not like your dad. You're not throwing the jabs. You're not throwing drop kicks. He looked at Pat and said, my dad's Rocky Johnson. I'm Dwayne Johnson. And he took his own style.
So you made the call to Pat. Pat brought him in. He was Vince said to sign him, and then
yeah, they signed him. And it was so funny. Vince said to me, "I'll have your son millionaire within 2 years." And I said to myself, "Sure." He told me the same thing. But he got Stone Cold clicked. Within 2 years, he made over $1 million. The rest is history. And it's funny to go into the movie part here. They asked him 5 times to go on Saturday Night Live, and he wouldn't go.
right.
He wouldn't go. He wasn't, I'm not interested. So Vince said, would you finally do it for me? Because Vince did the introduction to Saturday Night Live. You know, Vince, he wanted to be his territorial open, but, you know, his head's like this. So he goes on it. He did 6 different skits, and they seen how versatile he was. They sent him to California, and he's in Guinness's record books. It's the highest paid first-time actor ever when he did the Scorpion King.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
And I guess his first TV acting role was playing you.
Playing me
Yeah.
when on that 70s show. I had to sign like 15 papers for him to use my name and everything.
What did you think of that? I guess that looking back on it, that must be quite.
Yeah, but I look back at it now, I still have the tape, you know, and Ernie Ladd was in it. And I watched it and I said, you sound so much like me in the way he worked and everything, you know. And he wrestled the midget and he come back and said, look at that, midget bites all over me.
Now, would say his best feud that you enjoyed the most in WWE was his feud with Austin?
Yeah. And Vince will tell you to this day, they're strong money. They're making money. But they made more money when Bret Hart, Dwayne, Stone Cold were there. You know, so, you know, they go places now where they do 20,000. Now the houses are down to 10,000. But they're not losing any money. You know, they're just not making, if they end up making 800, say they made 800 million for the year, but 10 years ago they were making 200 million, you know, or 500, 900 million or whatever. I mean, look at WrestleMania, that's $1 billion. It goes all over the world. You know, you want to pay $79 to watch it? Fine. I watch it because I don't have to pay for it. But being in the business, I wouldn't pay $79 to watch it, you know.
Were you concerned at all when they first brought him in and the gimmick may not have been the best?
Well, what had happened was he went to Tennessee first. Nobody knew this. He went Flex Cabana. And they were paying him like $400 a week in Tennessee. But Vince already had him on contract and Vince was paying him $500 a week. So, and he left there, so now he comes to New York and he wants to be Rocky Maivia. Respect to me and respect for his grandfather. And I said, that's great, but it's not going to get over. People are not going to be can identify with you. So what had happened was it didn't get over. So he came back to me and he says, what do I do? Because Vince told him to think it's a new angle because they're actually, I think, we're probably going to get rid of it because it wasn't getting over. I said, be yourself. I said, call yourself The Rock. And he went out there and he joined the Nation of Domination. He took over. He became a heel. But he took public speaking and that in college so he could talk. And then he come up with they still call it SmackDown. You know, he was going down to SmackDown, Jabroni Hotel, and all that. And he started this feud and it clicked. He got over just like that. And was he a great worker? No. Did he have psychology? Great psychology. He knew when to hold him. He knew when to fold him. I mean, when you could stand there over a guy and take one elbow pad and throw it this way, take another one, and go like this and hit the ropes, give him an elbow, 1, 2, 3. You know, I got over it. I said, look at me, I got to throw 10 drop kicks to try and get over it.
Right.
But he got over it just like that. And you know, rest is history. Vince wouldn't let him go.
Were you surprised at how successful he became in the movies?
Yes, I was, because I never had a dream that he'd ever be in the movies, because he did that skit with that 70s show and he didn't like it. And he wouldn't go on Saturday Night Live until Vince convinced him. So when he went to Hollywood to do Scorpion King, I figured, oh, well, he'll get tired of it. Now look at him. The rest is history. He's the highest paid actor in the world.
Is there any movie of his that you particularly like?
Yeah, I like the ones where he has those kids, football players, young kids that are in prison, changing their life around after they get out. Like 70% made it, the other 70% went, 30% went back to doing drugs. And then he done the game plan where a family can watch it. Now he's this last one he done Fast and Furious and that it broke all world records. It did over $2 billion, but I'm not into that. 80 miles an hour and crashing up this car and shooting this guy. And he loves the game plan. He loves movies like that. But he's versatile. He can do any kind of movie.
Right.
He's just finishing one up now in Vancouver, Skyscraper. But they got the motorcycles and all that stuff and all them goofy stunts. But I look at it and I go, maybe when I was his age, I'd do it too. But I wouldn't do it today.
Maybe not unless you're getting the same pay you paid him.
Yeah, but then it'd be a little different, yeah.
And speaking of that, if you could be in one movie with your son that he's already done, which movie would it have been and what role would you have?
I would have played the one with the kids, the football players, the football team he started, that because he worked with the kids and he worked with them one-on-one. And a lot of those kids that were in that detention center, they had drug problems. They came from broken homes, so they really didn't have a chance in life. And he was his job to try and change their life around. And that was based on a true story, where this guy, and they offered him the role in the movie, and he wouldn't take it. And 70% was successful, from 27% up to 70. So that's a good rating, Like, I've taken this kid and I've helped him, and I've made something of him. Look at him now. Now he's this, or now he's a wrestler, or now he's a pro football player. Because they show you all that at the end. And they show you where this guy goes back to the gang. This one gets killed in a drive-by shooting. This one goes back and kills his stepfather. But you can't change the whole world. But I like those kind of movies where you're helping people.
And both of you guys were known for your strength and muscularity. How are you guys comparable in the gym at both of your primes? Did he ever match the lifts?
He never got up to 550. I did 555 bench at one time. And he got to 505. And I kept rubbing it in his face. Because he was bound. He was going. When he played for Miami Hurricanes, he was the strongest kid on the team. He was bench pressing like 505 pounds. But he could never get to that 5. I said, you'll never be as great. I said, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. But you didn't fall on the tree. And I'm the tree. So we have that kind of relationship. We're not father and son, we're best friends. There's nothing he wouldn't do for me, and he knows there's nothing I wouldn't do for him. Whatever he wants, up to sure.
Do you think he's done with the wrestling side of the business? Or
Yeah.
Yeah. He's done.
It'd be crazy to go back.
Yeah.
And I told him that. And like he said, he likes to meet the guys, talk to them, help them. But as far as you get in the ring, well, his contract he can anyway. Because the last time he wrestled Cena, WrestleMania, he got a hernia. He had to have emergency surgery. They had to shut the set down for 3 weeks. Well, setting the set down, it cost him $200,000 a day. So look how much the movie. So they put in his contract. That's it. Now you can either say no and go back to wrestling, or you can stay in the movies. Now he has 2 movie companies. So he's doing very well.
Would you say he's the greatest star the wrestling business has ever produced?
I would say one of them, yes. I'd say he'd be in the top 3. Yeah, most definitely.
He could definitely probably sell out any arena.
Man, was he win? He would sell it out. He went with John Cena, he beat him for the belt. They waited a whole year to come back for a return. And he gave him the belt back the same way Cena gave it to him.
Now he inducted you into the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah, me and my father-in-law, yeah.
What was that moment?
That was the greatest feeling in the world. But the greatest thing in a wrestling business that ever happened to me was I had a father and son match with him in Nassau, Bahamas. Me and him against a couple of local yokels that wore masks. And so I decided to let him take the fall. But he's in the dressing room telling me what to do and what not to do and how to do it. So we get out in the ring, he starts, Boom, boom, boom. 2 minutes later, his tongue's hanging out, and he comes back to tag me. I said, "What are you tagging me for? You know more than me, so go on back out." And I wouldn't tag him. And then he got the message after I let him blow up where he couldn't breathe.
That was just a local company.
Yeah, it was just it was run by a guy, I can't even remember his name, but they put on a show in Nassau. And there probably was maybe 800-900 people there. But it's a thrill when you can stand on the apron and look. I mean, how many this business they say there's father and sons, and we know they're not.
Right.
But I stood there and looked and said, "That's my son. I'm passing the gavel to him."
And also, it's very rare to find a second-generation wrestler that will match or surpass.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
almost never happens.
Yeah, it never happened. I don't think it'll be a long time before it happens again.
There's a lot of failed ones.
Oh yeah.
And you were telling me off camera now you ride horses, and could you just catch us up?
Yeah, we have a 220-acre farm in Steele, Missouri. We have a home in Florida, and that's where we live. Because what had happened when my wife's mother passed away, she left the farm to her. And so I have horses there, and I ride them a lot. And I like more or less just playing around with them. Sometimes when I'm in Missouri, I don't go in the winter. We lease all the land out, and they grow cotton and wheat and stuff. And I like to brush them down, ride them for a half hour, talk to them, play with them. Sheila will come out and go, "What are you out in the wire? It's 12:30 at night." It's better than me being at a bar at 12:30 at night.
Yeah. And you're still close with your son?
Very close. We live 5 minutes apart. We're all in the big circle. Okay. All the husbands, the wives, the ex-wives, and everybody. And we all get together for Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. It's one big happy family.
So even though some divorces have taken place, everything's fine?
Oh, everything's great. His ex-wife is the vice president of one of his movie companies.
Okay.
My ex-wife, I'll meet for breakfast now and then. Sheila and us, we'll meet with her. No problem.
Nice watch you have there, by the way.
It's a Rolex. My boy bought it for me.
Yeah, it looks like it's...
Brian, this was Brian Barrow fell in love with. This was 80. It's presidential mother of pearl.
Wow.
Rolex, 100 diamonds. There was $88,000.
That's amazing.
My boy takes care of me. What am I going to say? No?
No.
I said to him, "You shouldn't have spent that money, but I wanted it." So
I'm sure he's making enough that's like a...
He was the highest paid in the world. Yeah. Right? Last year made $185 million. He's got to deal with Armor All. He's got to deal with Ford Motors. I don't know if you've seen his commercials. No, yeah. He's got to deal with T-Mobile. He got his own clothing line, like this shirt, Under Armour. They're coming out with his clothing line in January. Everything he touches turns to gold. So we all live up there. I'm happy. He's happy.
I'm pretty sure you don't have it, but do you have any social media or anything where any fan watching this could follow you and see what you're up to?
Do we? We don't have social media.
Facebook.
Yeah, we have Facebook.
You have Facebook? Okay.
Yeah.
But the Facebook account is Rocky Johnson.
Yeah, the Facebook account is Rocky Johnson.
Okay, so you have Facebook. If anyone wants to book you for an autograph appearance.
Yes, that's what I would want, yeah. Because I enjoy doing the autograph signings because I get to meet guys I haven't seen in a couple of years, like Jerry Briscoe, Ryan Blair, and we all were together and we sat and lied to each other, tell each other how great we were when we were working. And, everybody has a ball.
Oh, speaking of your friends, yesterday at the Legends Lunch, I noticed that you and Ming were very close.
Very, very close, because when he came over here, he lived with me in Tampa, and he was only 18 years old, and he spoke very little English. I mean, they did nothing with him here. They did jobs every night, but I didn't charge him or anything, and he stayed with me, and I helped him, and he never forgot it. I'm very close with him, and he lives here now, and he comes up and visits me and us. Then he'll come up and visit Dwayne when Dwayne's home,
Did you ever see one of his infamous barroom altercations?
I've seen a couple of them.
Could you share any of them?
Yeah, where it take 10 guys to beat him, he go to you like a Dos Absent Salts. He was a tough guy. When he fought Jesse Barr, God bless him, he passed on now. That was the worst beating I ever seen somebody. I was trying to pull him off and I couldn't hold him. That was just like they snap,
I guess Jesse, is that the one where he made a racist comment?
Yeah, he made the racist comment. And They went outside. I mean, then he pulled his eye out. Then he stomped on it. And, you know, when Jesse passed on, he only had that one eye. They go right for the jugular vein.
Would you say that he's probably the toughest or one of the top?
I would say he'd be the top three. If I had to pick anybody, I'd pick him.
Okay. Who would the other two be if you put?
I say Harley Race was tough.
Yeah.
Very tough. The third one I'd have to think, but I was quiet, but I didn't take anything. I didn't give anything, but I didn't take anything from anybody.
Right.
You know.
I understand from reading your son's book, he was quite a tough guy in his youth as well.
Oh yeah, he almost killed the Heartbreak Kid. And then he got in a fight in the football team, and he got one of his own players. He's trying to pull his tongue out.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
What happened with him? What happened?
So they had lost the game,
Yeah.
and then the guy come in and said something smart and blamed him for the mistake. And he probably did make the mistake. And he goes, "Hey, I'm sorry," but he kept it going. And then he started making racial remarks. And that's something he don't play. He doesn't play that. He's half black and he's half Samoan, and he's proud of that, you know.
And with Shawn Michaels, what happened with him?
Shawn Michaels went to, so I wasn't there. I just heard the story. They got in the ring and something happened. Shawn threw the karate kick, and I guess he kicked him a little bit too hard. So Dwayne come back in the dressing room and told him, "Hey man, you hit me too hard. Calm down." But then he got smart with him. Said, "If you can't take it, you shouldn't be in this business." And the next thing you know, he's on the floor and Dwayne's on top of him. So I just heard the story. I wasn't there, you know.
And to close this off, is there any message you want to say to your fans that are going to watch this interview?
Yeah, I want to say thank you for believing in me. Thank you for all the support you've given me. Thank you for staying behind me. And without you fans, I believe there would be no Rocky Johnson.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Facebook at the Hannibal TV for more live streams and videos. And while you're at it, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the Hannibal TV.